Welcome everyone to the Street Epistemology call-in show / podcast. I'm Diamond from Diamond Discourse, and we have Rom here as well. You want to say hello?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Street Epistemology call-in show. My name is Rom, and I am a board member in Street Epistemology International. And I'm happy to be here for the first time.
Yeah, so this is, I've been on here a couple times, but we basically have some rotating hosts of this call-in show that are street epistemology practitioners. And the idea is that anyone can call in with a claim, and hopefully we can do some live SE on the show over the next about 2 hours or so. And alternatively, you can even call in just to talk about SE if you want to know more about it, or maybe you've tried it yourself and you just have some questions or some advice, or maybe you want to just voice some critiques or anything like that. That's no problem. We're happy to have you. And the way you call in, by the way, is you should be able to see in the chat window. I'll put on our names. In the chat window on YouTube, there, or wherever you're watching, there should be a link for the StreamYard link, and that'll bring you right to the backstage, and then we'll bring you on when we got a chance. So should be pretty straightforward. And last week, typically we have a couple callers by the end of the show, but sometimes it takes a little bit for people to warm up, so don't be shy. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for some people to call in, Rom, we've all been worried about you a little bit because you were in Russia at this pretty dramatic time. And so before we talk about SE, and I want to get your definition of SE and explain what the heck that is, but how are you doing? What has life been like for you?
Yeah, I appreciate you worrying about me. I've been doing pretty good now. I'm in Israel right now, and sorry about the lighting, by the way. It's a new place. I haven't got the lights yet to illuminate more of me when I speak. Yeah, it's nice. Everything's fine. No, what else to say? Yeah. I moved a lot during the last couple of months. I've been to a couple of countries here and there. Settled here in Israel for now, at least, maybe for a long time. We'll see.
Cool. So you're safe and you have internet, right? And that's that's what's important, right?
Yeah.
Oh, nice, solid. Maybe before we get too much into it, and we do have a caller in the background that we'll have join us in a minute, do you mind telling people what your understanding of street epistemology is? I know there's like a new module coming out that's like 50 pages, but for those who aren't familiar, can you give us just the elevator pitch?
Yeah, street epistemology. How did you say? I just had never heard about it before, so not sure what to say. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
It's like philosophy or something, right?
Yeah, something with a silly name. So to me, street epistemology is about talking about what matters and doing so effectively. It's about how do we know things that we claim we know. How do we process through our reasoning? How does our reasoning process work, and how do we discuss it? How do we make it more reliable if possible? And it's done so in a specifically nice, civil at least way. So we just try to collaboratively explore whatever there is to explore in whatever we believe. And yeah, that's what I like about it. It doesn't look a lot like regular conversations about anything people believe in, because regularly I observe people communicating with much more conflict, with much more emotions, maybe, I mean, negative emotions. And ultimately, it's not a lot of times that I see people getting somewhere where they want. Usually, each side wants to maybe convince the other side of something, and not succeeding at that, and then both of them getting frustrated. So all of that, basically, street epistemology is aimed at effective and civil conversations, in a couple of words.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good description, and that's why I was interested in it too. Just it feels like we need more of that in the world, and so yeah, I'm happy to participate. This is been a great community to be a part of. So we have Alfonso in the back, who I'm going to go ahead and bring in here. So we'll say hello. Let me
Hello, Alfonso.
see if he has. There he is. Hey,
Hello.
can you hear us okay, Alfonso?
Yeah, perfectly.
Awesome. How are you
I have
doing?
a barking dog, but
No
I hope
worries.
that's not too loud.
It's fine. Maybe it's doing street epistemology with other dogs.
Yeah, probably.
How would we know if that was happening?
No idea.
So Alfonso, what's up? Do you have a question or a claim you wanted to go over on the channel?
I got notified by the Discord channel, and I just clicked on it and brought me here. So
Nice.
I wanted to listen. I run some rooms in Clubhouse. I founded the Atheism Club, which is about to reach 10,000 followers. It's
Wow.
one of the biggest atheism clubs. And we actually interviewed Rom a few months ago. So it's good to see you again. Well, it's good to see you finally, because Clubhouse is audio based only. But yeah, we do some SC rooms and different topics on Clubhouse.
Are those still going on weekly? I do want to plug, how can people join if they want to get onto the Clubhouse discussions?
We haven't been doing much on SC lately.
Okay.
But yeah, you just join Clubhouse and look for Street Epistemology Club and join it, and you can start rooms. There's plenty of people who have interest in it, but people are mostly running rooms, just regular discussion rooms, and not a specific SC conversations. But there are plenty of people who are interested.
Do you know if Clubhouse is on desktop app yet?
Well, you can download Club Deck, which is
there you go,
an unofficial desktop version, which it's not rejected by Clubhouse because a lot of users use it. So they don't endorse it, but they under the table probably,
it works. Gotcha.
Yeah, they approve of it.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. And you stumbled into the show link. So there was, I think, one link for joining the show and then another link for just viewing, but you're welcome to chat. So in your experience, Alfonso, and drop out anytime you need to, but what do you think has been the advantage for using SE in terms of have you used it in the atheist channel a lot, I assume?
Yeah. So I used it as a part of my approach to having conversations. It's really good practice. And I've kind of gone my own path, because I think when you do an SC interaction, it's an interview, and it's and I have I have conversations that can stray or not be necessarily SC type conversations. So I did use lots of things I learned from SC, the training I gained from it, and but I do just one-on-one conversations with people who I want to connect with, and so
Right
it's
on.
just part of my toolkit right now.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, your sound is starting to go, so we might let you go. But feel free to jump on later on if you want to. And thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I just want to say that we indeed had a very nice discussion in Clubhouse with Alfonso and some other people. He's one of the people who brought street epistemology to Clubhouse, and yeah, brought a lot of cool people there as well. It was very nice. So I invite everyone to join wherever Alfonso is inviting you to join on Clubhouse. I'm sure it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alfonso mentioned the atheist clubhouse that he started, and that is kind of tied to the history of SE for sure, in terms of where it got its roots in the past. I tend to feel like it's grown beyond that narrow application, but it's still clearly useful for engaging in all kinds of beliefs. It's just if you search street epistemology on YouTube, probably the majority of videos you get are going to be about spiritual claims, I would say. I think that's fairly accurate to say, but I don't know. How do you feel about the ties to that history?
I'm okay with it. Yeah, to me, street epistemology is about talking about any kinds of beliefs, not only spiritually related or religious related. But yeah, it has its history, and it is whatever it is. We can change it even if we wanted to. So why bother?
We had a question in the chat that was from Jim Bob. I guess it was more directed at Chucky, but he was saying that sometimes Chucky was commenting about, I think I agree with you, even though I shouldn't because this is SE. So and Chucky followed up already saying that shouldn't say it during the conversation. What kind of things should we not do during SE? I think that's kind of the thread that they're discussing.
Yeah. So there's a am I audible?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
So there is this general understanding that you shouldn't talk or voice your own position during conversations, so that you wouldn't prime your interlocutor and sway them in some direction, or I don't know, make them more defensive or less. So whatever it is. So by default, it's usually suggested to conduct an interview from a neutral standpoint, and it makes sense. But at the same time, I wouldn't suggest trying to adhere to it all the times. If your interlocutor wants to know your stance on something, that if they ask you a specific question, a direct question, don't try to avoid it just because it's SCs. I don't see much benefit in that. We can just I think answer it, but not in a way that wouldn't make this conversation go in a separate direction. So we answer it, and we can still continue discussing our interlocutor's claim if we're both okay with it, of course, if we're both still interested. Because one of the reasons why we usually don't do it is because regular conversations can just jump everywhere, all over the place. We talk about this, now I hear you say something about something else, and I want to jump there because, wow, you believe that as well, or wow, I now I want to talk about this and this and that. And yeah, there's a lot of different things and nuanced pieces of beliefs, or even different beliefs that we might want to talk about that are mentioned in a single conversation. But we just generally advise to just pick one and go with it from start to end, if possible, and then move to the next one. But then again, if possible, if both are okay with it, otherwise, yeah, feel free to just end the SC part of the conversation, or just take a break from it and talk about whatever, anything else. It's all fine. So no hard and fast rules here, I think.
Yeah, I guess
Use
the
it
term
as
they use sometimes is messaging, right? That the concern is, as you say, that if we're directing the conversation by imposing our views, then that can change things a little bit.
Yeah, I think messaging is something else. In my understanding, is when we try to message. Is when we try to
Sorry.
to convey some specific position on our interlocutor, and that's not necessarily the same as just answering their question. If you're answering their question, it doesn't mean you're messaging. Of course, it might depend on how you answer it, but I think usually it wouldn't be considered messaging in a bad sense, at least.
I guess I have a question related to that. So I went out on Wednesday this week to the Supreme Court, because I live right outside Washington, D.C., and I got to practice. It's been a while since I've been out on the street, so to speak, and in the process of interviewing some people about their beliefs on abortion, because of course this was right the day after a big leak, basically overturning abortion rights in the United States. One of the people I was interviewing, actually a couple of the people I was interviewing, I was really tempted to ask them about the other side, the other side of the argument, because I had just heard it, and they weren't bringing it up themselves when I was asking them, well, what do you think the other side might say? So do you think in that kind of scenario, is it totally fine to go ahead and, inject, well, what about this? How would you approach that?
I would probably suggest starting with asking a general question, just as you said. What do you think would be some arguments against this position? Are you aware of any relevant arguments against this? Any kind of question like this. And if they're not aware, and if they're interested in learning them, then you might as well just present some of it to them, at least. Yeah. If for example they say, yeah, I just don't know what possible arguments could be against it, and you can say, well, I've heard this one, what do you think about that? You can present it, right, but you can just invite them to make their assessment of it. Yeah, you don't impose it on them. You can present it, and what do you think about it? If they say, well, it's bullshit, it doesn't mean anything, okay, it's what they think. We just given them what they wanted, something that they were not aware of.
Well, we have Pine Creek backstage. I think you may have heard of him, so we can bring him on. Welcome.
Yeah,
Pine Creek. How's it going?
It's going well. On what not to do, just watch my channel and you'll know what not to do.
Pine Creek is the anti-essayist, right?
No, actually, I think Rom kind of touched on this. You can kind of get away with giving your own opinions and agreeing or disagreeing if you build up enough rapport.
Absolutely.
And I think you can by doing so, you can gain respect, and that will help have a fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I'll even go further and say that I think Pine Creek is one of the experts at doing just that, at doing non-conventional SC, if you will. Maybe it's not exactly SC, not all the time, but partially it is, and he's just doing it almost on the verge of what's allowed, of what's possible. Sometimes it seems like, and usually it's fine as long as you're both on the same page with your interlocutor. As long as no one feels offended, no one feels triggered by anything.
Like, there's a lot of critiques about SC, and I don't think any of them are valid, except for maybe this one, and that is that the pure SC interview style might be a little too robotic or too non-human? Do you guys see what I'm getting at here? Because nobody in life talks this way, where it's just one person always asking all the questions, right?
Right. Well, it's like an interview, I think, is a better description than it's not a normal conversation, right?
You're right.
asking questions. So if you pose it in that style, well, that's not a normal conversation anyway, I feel like.
Yeah, that's
You're
true.
doing an interview.
Yeah, so I'm with you. I'm all for making SC more natural and less robotic, and you can do it through different means. For example, you can ask for an interview, and if your interlocutor is expecting an interview, they wouldn't feel like your questions are robotic or something like that, unnatural. Or you can just interject your SC conversation with something else, maybe just small talk about whatever, maybe unrelated, anything. Basically, I always suggest do whatever you feel like to make it more natural.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is related, Pine Creek, but if you're saying like it can be a script sometimes, I think that can even still be well done. Like if you take a look at Being Reasonable, that's Mark Solomon's show. He does have kind of a set questions. I mean, he's a psychologist by training, and he does tend to ask the same questions over and over again, but he does it in a fairly natural way. And the advantage to that from a scientific perspective is that if you want to see, is SE effective as a conversation tool, you know, having that kind of controlled, slightly less, variables bouncing around, I think there's an advantage there too. But I don't know. That's a whole other topic of how it gets researched.
What's your opinion about, like, Jim Bob is criticizing, I think, SE because SE starts with starting assumptions. Would you admit that SE starts with a starting assumption, kind of in the background of maybe a motivation of why you do it, that the scientific method is the best way to coming to knowledge? Do you think that's kind of like a hidden underlying theme that us atheists kind of go into these conversations with?
I think it's mostly true, yeah. I think SE has a lot to do with the scientific method, and the way we do it resembles the scientific approach a lot, at least to me, because we ask, how can we test things? How confident are you about it? And what are the alternative explanations that we can think of? So yeah, at least in the, of course, it only applies to the areas where science applies. We're not talking about that, about feelings, for example. But yeah, mostly true.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, like, sometimes some people might need to hear that. There's cards on the table. I think this is a better way to truth than, let's say, maybe your method. Although you wouldn't come out and say it that way, because then the defenses go up. But the thing is, like, I'm not scared to admit that, because I do believe it, and I think most people do as well. Especially when you start applying the outsider test for faith, when, let's say, they come with some other epistemologies, it's very easy to show why you can be a Jew, a Muslim, a Hindu, a Christian, an atheist. On certain things on planet Earth, you can run certain tests and we all arrive at the same answer. But try that with topics of religion and politics. It's like, it's really difficult.
I think that there should be some division made between, right, the SE technique or practice and the beliefs and motivations of the people doing it. So clearly those can be different. And even if a majority of people do have that that worldview of science being the best method to figuring these things out, I mean, there's clearly people that use street epistemology that don't necessarily have that view. I've talked to some of them, and they're still using these kind of techniques, and it does kind of resemble the scientific method and how you're approaching it, but I wouldn't say it's like, it's not necessarily an underlying assumption like core to SE. I think it's maybe core to a lot of the people applying it. Is that?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like I seem to remember there's one Christian who had a channel that was kind of SE-ish, but it seemed to fall flat. I forget, he was on the SE Facebook group, one of the Facebook groups, but it always ended up being like someone's could very easily, like, you would question, why couldn't faith be a reliable way to coming to knowledge? And it was almost like he was digging his own grave when I was watching him. But anyhow, yeah, I don't think it's, I think it's totally fine to come on as an SE or with a person like Jim Bob in the live stream chat, who's very much wanting to, poke holes, just to admit, maybe even admit, well, here's another question. Is it okay to admit or say something like that your motivation doesn't even matter? Because I really don't think it does. So let's say I had, from the Christian perspective, the evil intent of purposely wanting someone to lose their faith. Let's say that's my motivation, but I don't say it to them. But, deep down, that's my heart. It's filled with this desire to squash their hope, meaning, and purpose. You could still conduct a very nice, cordial conversation with a Christian, even having that motive, right?
I think.
Do you think go ahead, Rom.
Yeah, I just want to say that as long as you don't deceive anyone, your interlocutor in particular, it's fine to have whatever motivation you have, as long as you don't make them think you have some other motivation, because deceiving is something probably we don't endorse. But yeah, on the other hand, even if you want to share all your motivations with your interlocutor, you might not be able to, because there might be so many of them, and they might change during a conversation. I might not even be aware of all my motivations coming into a conversation. And that's also fine.
Well, my point is, like, your motivation, I think, is irrelevant. You can critically examine reasons for someone holding a belief, and whether you have good motivations or bad ones, how does it even really affect it?
Yeah, theoretically, I would agree with that. You can conduct a street epistemology conversation, and it just, you can look at it as a tool, and you can use the tool for whatever reasons you want.
Well, does the motivation affect your questions, though?
Yeah, if it does, then it becomes relevant. But what I'm saying is, like, there's many times where on my channel, someone new comes in, and depending on, exactly what I'm talking about, they don't know I'm an atheist. In fact, sometimes when I'm talking about the Bible, they think I'm a Christian. And so they're listening to me, they're kind of engaged. And then as soon as they hear I'm an atheist, it's like everything changes, right? And it's like, oh, you're one of them. And so, yeah, and I guess this is the reason to be neutral, right? You don't want to risk ruining the investigation part by having that bias prop up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of science, by the way, you asked whether we have this assumption, and I kept thinking about it, and now I can't even remember that I met any person who thought that science was not a good thing. Everybody, I think, atheists, theists, people who are into science, people who are into magical thinking, everybody will say that they respect science.
I've met some.
You met?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's an interesting conversation in its own. It could be, at least, like, what do you mean when you say you don't respect science, for example? What other alternatives do we have? How do we go on about learning things? Yeah, it's interesting and so on.
No, the biggest complaint I've heard about science is they keep changing their mind, those scientists, you know. It's like new evidence comes and they change their mind. I need to have my foundation on something firm, not something that's shaky.
You see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard criticisms of science that that the foundation that it's built on are assumptions, right? That you can't demonstrate, and so what difference is there from a separate set of assumptions, right? That, but yeah, I think that the criticism isn't so much that science isn't useful or helpful typically, but that it's not the only thing, right? It's not the only path to truth. That sort of attitude.
Right. The underlying the philosophy of science, not the practical implications.
Right.
Science is just like faith. Science is faith. You just believe in it, and there are assumptions that yes.
Well, one of the key assumptions with science is the uniformity of nature, that we can run tests. We don't need any other, God factors to put in the equation. If I play pool and I hit the cue ball and it hits at a certain angle, it doesn't matter if I'm an atheist or a Christian, that ball is going to reflect at the angle it came in on. And the beauty of science is it can be so consistent and repeatable. And it's like, these are things I think most people love.
Yeah, I would even say that the uniformity of the laws of nature comes from empirical evidence, not from assumptions. If there will be a lack of uniformity, we will just take it as it is.
Right. Yeah. But so far, it's it works.
Yeah. So far, so good.
How can we get more people to come on here? How do we get theists to want to come on
the call-in show? You mean?
Yeah, right now.
It doesn't have to be theists, though.
Or
anyone with any claim is totally fine. And Doug, if you want to make a claim, we're happy to SE
all my
you on
claims
something.
are like balls falling and stuff.
Yeah. So when you say all your claims are that, do you mean like
not all, but the ones like?
Yeah. What do you think is a criteria for a claim to be discussed in SE?
One that people care about, I guess, like a deeply held belief. But I have so few deeply held beliefs. In fact, like I'm willing to shed almost any belief I have if I become convinced. It's like I'm not tied to anything. I don't even care. Like if someone said, "Oh, we found a bunny in the Precambrian layer, so evolution is false," I say, "Okay, like fine." But I was talking about veganism today with a guy, and I'm a speciesist, so I value humans more than bunny rabbits. And but I don't even know if a claim like that can be SE'd because it's kind of boring.
I just want to say that I don't see any problem. I don't see any problem with discussing not deeply held beliefs as well. We just can discuss whatever the most reliable ways are about thinking of something. For example, my personal belief that I discussed just the other day with someone, that it should be prohibited to keep dogs in a multi-apartment buildings. And I can easily, of course, not have this belief, and I'm willing to.
That's true, right?
Look at evidence. I mean, it is, of course. To me, it is because, yeah, they bark, and there's a lot of problem with that. So, yeah, but it's not my deeply held belief. If I wouldn't have it, I would be just the same person.
Although, would you be the same person? Doesn't it affect your behavior? Like, whether you have a
not
dog,
quite, of course. Any belief, without any belief, we could say that we wouldn't be exactly the same person, but mostly so, I would say.
Yeah.
You wouldn't feel the difference, probably.
I mean, I think animals have a huge impact on your life potentially. So I think that that's actually one that I've had. It's funny because I had the same thought about a similar claim as to owning animals, and that question in general is interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you decide that, actually it's not reasonable to have an animal in your current house, that's going to affect you for the next decade, right? Potentially.
Like I do say on my channel, like in the last year, I will say things like, I make the claim that I know that there's no God or gods. So we can investigate that claim if you want. That'd be fun.
Sure.
Actually, let me close my door.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Rom,
Well,
you want to take this one or
we can? Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah. Am I understanding correctly that there are no callers?
Yeah,
no
as soon
viewers.
as soon as you get a caller in, like boot me, okay?
No problem. Yeah. Well, yeah, for now. So anyone who's listening can feel free to jump on to the StreamYard link at the top of the chat. But yeah, let's go ahead and SE Doug on his claim. And I'll step out of the room for a minute and just let you and Rom talk.
You can stay if you want. I like to be double teamed. It's fine. We all know each other.
Yeah,
All
by the
right.
way, I don't see any problems with having two SEers or two interlogutors. It
I'm
might
not
be fine
defensive.
sometimes. Yeah, don't take these general rules.
Trying to make me
like
cry,
one-on-one.
guys.
Right. Okay, Doug. Yeah, so you claim you know that there are no gods.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit more about what you mean by no.
Excellent
What do you
first
mean?
question, because that's the key. I don't define knowledge as 100% certainty. And so in other words, I believe I can say I know there's no God or gods, and yet still admit that I could be wrong. There's still a chance that a God exists. But I would say that, for example, this is the example I always give on my channel, that I can say I have a knowledge that when I let go of this pen, it will fall downwards towards the earth 100 times out of 100 times. Could I be wrong about that? Even that I could be wrong. It might hover or might go up, but I still make that knowledge claim. In the same way, I know that there's no God or gods.
All right. So basically, you admit that you could be wrong and there could be gods. So that's all I wanted to know. Thank you for the talk. Next one, please.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's like the SE conversation becomes so incredibly short when you're reasonable. Sorry, that was rude, right?
No. It's fine. And I was half kidding. Of course, we could keep uncovering this claim, but at the same time, it is true that SE conversations could and sometimes should be very short.
But what would you ask me next, given that?
Well, we could just discuss basically the main question I would ask you next would be what would the evidence for God look like for you?
Excellent. To me, the definition of God for most people would involve some type of non-natural, i.e. supernatural realm. And I wouldn't even know what that exactly means, but I've been told by many adherents of believers in God that it involves things like miracles. So evidence for a God to me would be some amazing type of miracle. And I think that would change my mind. So, for example, someone that several different people have been dead for many, many years. We walk into the cemetery, we pray in the name of this God for them to come back to life, and they bubble through the earth and they walk up and say, "Hey, everyone, I'm alive." That to me, my whole world would change if I saw that. And if other people were there to confirm it of different biases, it's been confirmed that they've been dead and that they confirmed they've been buried, which we all have that. My whole world would be rocked.
Okay, so anything basically that would go against what we know about the laws of nature, and it would be somehow strictly related to a God.
Yeah, I would still be fuzzy on what this actually means, what this God is actually like. But I would say that I would be open to the idea of God now. My confidence that a God does exist would go up. And I probably, my confidence in naturalism would go way down. The metaphysical naturalism, like the idea that there's no gods.
Understandable. Here, I shared my views.
You're breaking
Yeah.
all the rules. You haven't even asked him for the confidence scale.
I haven't yet. Well, I kind of had actually, but not in numbers. I asked what Doug meant when he said he knows it. He claims to know it, and he explained that. From what he explained, I implied that he has a high level of certainty, just not 100%, maybe 99 point something, and I didn't even need to ask.
Yeah. And what's strange is a lot of people on planet Earth do believe in a God. So I'm rare. And a lot of people on planet Earth would say that they know a God exists. They'll use that language, no. And I think it's very fair that I can say I know one doesn't. And I think my reasons are better.
My reasons are better than yours.
No.
Exactly how SE works.
How do you know when to end a SE session? Like, what is the point that you stop at?
That's a good question. Was it a question to me or to Doug?
Open question.
I would say that when you've pinpoint exactly what would change someone's mind, and I gave it here, seen an amazing miracle. And then, so now you would investigate, okay, well, what if someone comes up to you and says they know someone who bubbled up through the dirt in the cemetery? Would you now believe it then? And what would you just believe them? Does it have to be you seeing it? You go into more detail, exactly what evidence would change your mind. And once you pinpoint it, then I think that's these discussions over, and you're basically then now going into evidence mode.
Okay, I would probably generalize this question, this answer, and say that it's a good place to end this conversation when you have made progress in this conversation, or otherwise you've exhausted all the resources or all the opportunities for that. And by progress, we could mean different things. For example, if your interlocutor or you and your interlocutor have started reflecting on something that you haven't reflected on before, and that might be a good point of ending the conversation. Or we could agree on something. For example, we could come to an understanding that this specific information that we can Google, for example, should influence our confidence on that. Then it might be a good place to end the conversation as well, because then we can just go do our research, possibly come back to this conversation at a later point. But we've made progress. We've came to an understanding, or we've learned something new, or we've started reflecting on something, anything like that.
Or 2 hours. Once 2 hours hits, you should quit no matter what.
Or
People get way too tired after 2 hours.
Yeah, if you just get bored or anything, right? Or that's basically.
Or when you see the viewers' numbers start to drop on a live stream.
Speaking seriously, I would probably even suggest looking at 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. I would say that if you haven't made progress in your conversation in 10 to 20 minutes, chances are you will not make it at all. Maybe at this session at least.
I agree with that.
Because 10 minutes is plenty of time to make progress, to just at least to understand each other, or to ask some nice questions.
Or when your interlocutor starts talking about philosophy instead of the claim made, then you know it's time to end it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because to me, that's a sign of that they really don't want to talk about them and their claim. They basically want to just poke holes in what the method, or that they're being defensive because they're coming in with this idea of what SE is, and they're just being basically combative from the start, not answering questions, refusing to enter hypothetical questions. But like, if you can't ask hypothetical questions in an SE session, then like, do you continue, or are you handcuffed at that point?
I think we can and probably should always go meta if something goes not in the direction of progress in this conversation. We can just go up, say, step out of the SE shoes or whatever you call it, and say, dude, let's just discuss whatever is happening. Do we want to continue this, and for why? What's in it for you? What's in it for me? What do we want to discuss? What would be an ideal ending in this conversation for both of us here and now? Yeah, we can discuss that. And if we don't come to an agreement, then yeah, there's no need to proceed.
So Atmospheric wants to know, does Pine Creek use SE? In which context, or why not? When do you not use SE?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, when is SE and when is it not? Because, Rom said that I do a sort of unique version of SE. So I view SE as basically 95% of the time Socratic method, and not just any Socratic method, but the method of getting to the roots of how people arrived at their beliefs. So if you're asking different types of questions, it's not really SE. And so a lot of times what's SE and what's not SE is blurred. It can be blurred, or it can be fuzzy. So I would say that when people come onto my channel and they're theists, because I'm mostly a theist show or atheist theist show, and I'm meeting them for the first time, we haven't talked before, I tend to lean more towards doing SE style. So I'll ask them basically, what do you believe? Kind of get the claim, then ask, how did you arrive at that? Why do you believe that? What would change your mind? But then other times theists want to come in and just talk theology, and that's fine too.
Yeah, so when it's just a normal conversation, so to speak, that you're not trying to drill down into their belief system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say that it is blurred, and it should be so, because I think any conversational tool or style would be blurred. It would not have a clear borderline where you know where you're doing it, or sometimes you know that you're not doing it, sometimes you know that you're doing it, but sometimes it's just for anyone to say, and it's okay. I think it's how it should be. Also, I like thinking about SE not as a switch that I turn on or off. Am I in an SE mode now, or am I not? I just try to conduct natural conversations and achieve results, whatever they are, whatever they should be.
Yeah. Can you bring up the one comment, Diamond? What was it?
Yeah.
Theists admit faith, naturalists pretend no faith exists in their worldview. Mm-hmm. That's an interesting comment, because I admit faith often, but I tell people what I mean by that. If you're going to have the word faith mean trust, I have faith my chair's not going to fall down right now. If I knew that in 10 seconds my chair's going to collapse, I'm going to stand up. But I have faith that it's not, so I stay seated. And I think most atheists are okay with that definition of faith. But what the key thing with faith is when to know when your faith has been misplaced. And so I would know my faith in this chair is misplaced when it falls. And the question now becomes, when would the theist know their faith has been misplaced?
Yeah, I would add to that that the interesting thing about the word faith, and maybe the most troublesome thing, is that it can have so many different meanings. Some words work like that, and we should just make an effort for the words not to deceive us, because we can say, faith is a good example of that. We can say, I have faith in my friend or in my brother, or I have faith in a God, or I have faith in the fact that Australia exists, or I have faith that I will pass an exam tomorrow. And all of those, or almost all of those, I use it in different meaning. Don't look at the word, look at the meaning that I put into those words. And it was different. So we should use words so that they would help us convey meaning, and not the other way around. We shouldn't be slaves of the words that we use. Some people might say, well, you use this word or you use this, but in what sense? Let's just discuss what we mean by it.
Yeah. And, and this is why SC is so valuable and so important. And I say this sincerely because there are people that just that comment that came up about faith, we humans get so defensive about certain words and what they mean. And it's like, you're saying that I'm stupid for believing this based on faith. And Essie kind of cuts through all that and says, no, I'm not judging you. Let's really together as a team explore why you believe this stuff and what would change your mind, what would change my mind. And it doesn't have to be combative. It doesn't have to be like us versus them. So this is the beauty and the strengths of Essie, because it really does. I think if someone's doing it properly, someone could say they believe what might sound like the weirdest thing. And by the end of the conversation, you say, I understand exactly why you believe this and what would change your mind. And I see the evidence differently maybe, but if I saw it like you did, I'd probably believe it too.
Yeah, that's also one way to end a conversation. Just pure understanding of your interlocutor. If you can steelman them, that's actually one of the first things we teach usually when we teach through epistemology, is just learn how to steelman your interlocutors, whatever they believe in. Even if you don't like their reasoning and don't like their beliefs, try to steelman them. Try to put yourself in their shoes and think like them.
Yeah,
that's the first basic step and very, very important.
Yeah. And even the most controversial issues, I think that's when you have to do it the most, steelman the most.
Yeah. I wish more people would just try do that, like the conservatives and Republicans and liberals would try to steelman each other instead of just attacking each other, theists and atheists or whatever communities.
Yeah, if I can on my show convince people that I'm a drug hugging, granola crunching, sandal wearing liberal, I mean, if they don't know the difference between that or me being a conservative, I mean, that's amazing. That's wonderful. That's like, because people don't know where you're coming from and they're trying to figure out what really you can steelman to such a degree that they don't know any different. Like, and most people feel the need to be understood. I think as you get to my age, you're kind of okay with people not understanding you. It's like, okay, you don't understand me, no big deal. But I think most people just really love saying, hey, that person gets me. He knows exactly what I'm saying and why I'm saying it. And so that you can disagree, but still have a great relationship and conversation because you understand each other.
Yeah, I think not even most people, but all of us love being understood at least by someone.
I love it when my wife understands me, but whether Diamond does,
yeah, but by some people more than others. But we need to be understood, to feel understood. That it's one of the universal needs, I think.
I just tweeted, so hopefully you get more people coming in here. I should do it on my YouTube channel, and then because I got like 10 to 20% Christians and other theists watching my channel.
Is the SE method finalized, Atmospheric asks, or is it evolving? What, if any, has changed in the method since it started? That's a great question. Diamond, you've been silent. Did you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the focus, well, certainly the focus has shifted to be more broader application, as we were talking about before, that it did start with specifically questioning spirituality and religious claims in general, and now it has been applied to just anything. If you look at like cordial curiosity or being reasonable or any of these other YouTube channels, they question any claim under the sun, basically, including the existence of the sun. So I think that that's one big change. And also it's become a lot more, let me see. It's become a little more humble, I think. If you read the Orange Book, as I call it, which is still a pretty good book. It's the Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, which was a much improved version of the old A Manual for Creating Atheists. I haven't actually read that one, but in that Orange Book, it still comes off as condescending in parts, I think. That it seems like there's an emphasis on changing the person's mind or getting someone to realize that they're mistaken, as opposed to looking at, hey, I might be mistaken. And I think that that's an aspect, even if you think there's a remote chance of it, like being able to entertain the idea, I think is a major shift in how conversations have been approached. I don't know. Does that resonate with you, Rom?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I will then answer another part of this question. The question was also about, is SC finalized or is it still evolving? And the answer is, it is definitely still evolving, and it will continue to evolve. Why would it ever stop evolving? You can think about it as, or at least I like to think about it as science of conversation. Has science stopped? Has science been finalized, or does it keep evolving? Of course, it keeps evolving. Some of the things, some of the laws of nature might be, well, if not finalized, but more refined than others at this point. The same is with the sea, and probably will be some aspects will be more refined, some are more refined at this point already, but of course it will and should keep evolving, because new evidence comes and will keep coming. We want to conduct scientific studies, already started looking into that and reaching out to the researchers. Some of them have already answered, but yeah, it's a long story, and of course it's a dynamic process, as it should be.
Yeah, it's definitely been humbled. I mean, Peter Boghossian's faith is pretending to know things you don't know. It doesn't, sit well with a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, it has changed quite a lot since the beginning.
And follow-up question, how do we know if the method's working?
Results.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, what do you mean by working? We need to set some criteria, right? And formally, the way to answer them would be to scientifically study it. That hasn't been done yet. So we don't have a very high certainty that it works tremendously for different goals. We just expect it to be somewhat effective for some specific purposes, but of course it's a matter of further research. So far, what we have is scientific findings that are indirectly related to SC, like deep canvassing, motivational interviewing, and lots of stuff like that. And also we have anecdotal evidence about street epistemology, which you might say it's not much, and I would agree. Yeah, further study, further research is much needed, and we're onto it. As of now, just take whatever you feel like is useful for you from street epistemology, and don't take anything else. You can see it as a collection of tools and use on your own discretion.
I think even anecdotal evidence is good. Just like whenever you have a conversation with someone or an interview, and you're not fighting, you're not yelling, you like each other, you get to the root of the belief, what would change your mind? Success, right? It's a lot better than what we see a lot of times online of people not even hearing each other. I think that is one good definition of it working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just what is your definition of success there? It's just a pretty low bar in that case. Not ending in an argument, right?
Actually, you think that's a low bar, but nowadays, especially online, when to have a civil conversation or an interview where someone's not yelling or getting angry or defensive, that's pretty amazing nowadays on a deeply held view.
It is challenging sometimes, even when you're doing SE, not to like mirror back the same emotion. Like I was talking about when I was at the Supreme Court earlier this week, and that was one of the things I noticed is that when someone was getting passionate about something, I felt like I have to also like get passionate about and trying to calm yourself and let that not get heated, even if you're not necessarily disagreeing with them. It can still be something that takes practice, essentially.
Yeah.
How do you stay so cool?
How old are you, Diamond?
Gosh, I'm old enough. I'm like 38. Yeah,
You have
something
kids?
like that. Yeah, couple kids.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Young.
But yeah, as soon as you'll learn that when they become teenagers, you kind of just have to learn to accept what you can't control and lower your expectations a little bit.
Do you think your demeanor in conversations has changed since using SE, or were you like always using SE, Doug, do you think?
Oh no, my channel's definitely changed. Like the early years, I probably was more like you guys on how I conducted SE. But now, since I have so many repeat viewers, they know where I'm coming from. They know deep down I'm not a bad guy. They've heard me say things like, when the Christians come on my show, they know that I don't want my wife to leave Christianity, and I support her community groups and stuff. So they know that even though I might say jokingly that I'm here to destroy their hope, meaning, and purpose, they know that I'm not, out to maliciously really hurt them. And so I don't really have to do the work of rapport building that much anymore, because they know me better than I know them. And I can just make it more conversational, but yet still with the same goal of getting to the root of why people believe what they do. And for most people, at least like with the Muslims and Christians I talk to, I'd say at least over 50% of the time, it comes down to personal experiences. And here's another interesting question. When you ask someone, how did they arrive at this belief or this conclusion? I would say the majority of the time, they don't even know why. And they give reasons instead of the reasons why they believe it. They give reasons that they feel they can most defend instead. Mm-hmm. And so, like I've talked to Jim Bob, and he's in the live stream chat here. Like he's talking about presuppositional arguments, tag arguments, the basis of reality and all that stuff. I can almost guarantee you these are not the reasons why he believes, but he feels these are the best way to defend. And I know this because I've talked to him. And so this is one of I think the weaknesses in SE is because sometimes a person might not even know why they believe what they believe. And yet we're asking them to try to explain it. And because we animals, we're complicated. There's probably so many different reasons we're not even aware of, we can't even remember, that date back to our childhood. Yeah, it's complicated. Psychology is a complicated thing.
Yeah, and I think it's fine that sometimes we don't fully understand our own reasoning. Like, for example, if you were to explore some of my beliefs, I would say from the start, Well, I haven't thought about this one a lot yet, so I'm really excited, and I expect to just think about these things, some of these things for the first time during this conversation. So let's go for it. Yeah, so I know even about my own beliefs. If I haven't given them enough thought, they would my reasoning might change during this conversation, and it's a good thing.
It's so refreshing to me when I ask someone, how did they arrive at this belief? And they say, well, because I was raised this way. I'm like, thank you. I mean, that's such an honest answer that probably applies to most of us, that a lot of why we believe something is how we've been conditioned throughout our whole life. It's just so incredibly honest. And especially when they even admit that that's probably not a good reason, but this is the true reason.
And is there's a point where it doesn't make sense necessarily to evaluate the reasons for everything you do. We have so many beliefs in our head that there's not enough time in the day to reflect on everything. Like, why do I believe that, I have a coffee cup downstairs, right? That sort of thing. You could reflect on all of this stuff, and it does have impact on your life, but you don't have time to go through it all, I guess. So you may not be aware of the reasons you have, but does that mean you don't have good reasons?
Yeah, you might. And the question is, try to discover what they really are. What's the what's the hierarchy of them? How many of them do you have to get rid of before the belief collapses? And like most of our beliefs are a web that's tangled up like a ball of the spider webs. And, you can pluck one out and they still believe it, pluck three out,
Yeah.
still believe it. But what's really the core? What's holding it all together?
Is that an underlying assumption of SE practitioners, or is that inherent to SE that beliefs are this web that you can find sort of or a tree, like that you can find a trunk or anything like that? Is there a basis for that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, but I would assume that it's not an underlying assumption. You don't need it for a C. It's probably coming just from experience that sometimes you encounter such webs of beliefs, but you probably what we do in a C, we just want to get to the core reason whether there is an intricate web surrounding it or not.
Yeah, well,
Maybe
that's
they
true.
know their core reason. It's fine.
I think the more you get to the deeply held beliefs, the more convoluted and webbed it becomes. Maybe like on superficial type beliefs, hey, I believe this for one reason and one reason only. If this changed, I'm out. And I think maybe some political views are like that. But religious views especially, I think it's so... like I just know from experience, so many of the reasons people give me why they believe, they're there, but they're not the real reason, because you can tell it in their demeanor and their excitement. Once they get to a certain reason, you can see the passion in them. And I've seen it so many times with Christians, especially when they talk about seeing demons. It's just the other live stream I had the other day. All of a sudden the guy starts talking about, I was in a nightclub and I saw a demon, and I know there's a spiritual realm out there. I know it. That was a demon. And it's like, whoa, like, this runs deep for him.
And you can understand why, if you saw a demon, you would believe this, right?
Yeah, Doug, if you saw what I saw, you would believe this too. Yeah. I'd love to see a demon, to be honest.
Same.
I would love to interview a demon.
So John from Quality Questions mentions you may have just trouble articulating your reasons, and that's okay. It's good to learn that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And feel free, anyone in the chat, if you want to come on and discuss SE or make a claim, that's okay.
Yeah, I'll hop off. I shared on my channel. So I say 10% of my viewers are religious, very religious. So, and a few political. So maybe you'll get some people hopping on.
All right, nice having you here, Doug.
Are you gonna see you tomorrow, Rom?
Probably not, if you mean poker, because it's just too late. I sleep at that time.
Oh yeah, man, time zones, terrible thing. Why did God have to make the world a sphere? Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you.
So,
All right.
Rom,
Yeah.
while we're waiting for some other callers, you have your own channel, Rom. I'm guessing you haven't uploaded in a while, I think, but it's all in Russian, right? So I have no idea what the conversations are like. Does it seem particularly different internationally, or just doing interviews in Russia?
I think it's mostly the same. Yeah, we have some conversations, and we haven't uploaded in a while. There are some interesting conversations, and if you knew Russian, I think you would say that it's mostly similar to what you're used to. But most of them are not about religion, though. So there are all kinds of beliefs to explore there, which I like.
Danny's asking about what are the topics of discussion. I'm not sure if that's specifically about your channel, but in general for street epistemology, we were saying it can be potentially anything. We can discuss whatever you believe and why, essentially. But would you say on your channel it does range pretty widely, or do you tend to have mostly supernatural?
Yeah, let me just go there and check, because I haven't been there for
Fair
a long
enough.
time.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna
get
the evidence, right?
Yeah. I remember there were a couple of conversations about capital punishment. I remember a couple of conversations about atheism. Yeah. Hopefully it will load.
Awesome. Well, and Danny's here, so he can clarify his question too, maybe. So let me just bring him in.
All right.
Hi, Danny.
Hey guys. So my channel, I guess you're familiar with my channel, like the Phil Talk channel. Is that what when you said you're?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm not familiar with it. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it?
Oh no, I just didn't know. I got confused when you were responding to my question. Well, on your channel, and I'm like, oh, what channel? But,
gotcha. Yeah, I was referring to Rom's channel at that time. But what was your
now
question
that we're
about
here, let's talk about your channel.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Sure.
Oh, it's not. I mean, I'm a philosophy student, so I like philosophical discussions. But a lot of people, and y'all might have this problem too. Maybe not, but let's say you really just like having discussions with people and like exploring their views. 95, maybe 90% of the time, though, it's like all about theism and religious belief. Whereas like you're totally open to the other 10%, right? So that's kind of how my channel is that I like philosophy, but like my viewers prefer like talking about theism, and so I have a lot of content on theism. But if tomorrow we all woke up and stopped caring about theism and we cared about something else, like, I don't know, like morality, or which is still pretty popular, then I would be just as happy, right? But I don't know if y'all have that kind of issue as well or not.
So it sounds like you're saying like it can change just based on the topic of the day almost, as to what people are interested in.
So you go with the trend, you're saying, right?
Well, I am going with the trend, but I'm just saying that y'all are probably interested in all sorts of topics, but most of your discussions are probably about Christianity and maybe religious belief. Maybe I'm wrong about that. What would you say is the most common type of thing that y'all talk about when you run your street epistemology, I suppose?
Diamond, do you want to take the first? Because we
one
both have some
of the
experience.
things that I think that the way we ask the question can greatly influence what claims we get. So when we're out in public, I try to be really careful with how I phrase my introduction, because I really think that even using the word belief can sort of seed people into thinking about religious stuff just by the nature of the word. And so sometimes I will try and use the term idea, or something you think is true about the world. I like that one. And by making it, just tweaking it a little bit, that can help in terms of getting different ideas. I had a conversation the other day, I haven't posted it yet, on parties. And this person was really passionate about like social parties and the importance of them. And I thought that was so cool. It was like totally out of left field, and we had an interesting conversation. But yeah, I think that it's really easy to drift into a topic as the SE practitioner, to unintentionally give some topics, because the other thing is a lot of times they want to know, well, give me an example, right? And as soon as you give some examples, well, there you've already seeded the conversation somewhat. And so, another way I've tried doing it is, well, what was on your mind most recently? What, as you're walking down the street, is there something that you've been reflecting on that's been important to you? This sort of thing. So yeah, I don't know. It varies a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. If you want to talk about something in particular, there are lots of ways to shift the likelihood of you talking about it. Just subtle phrasing, or which examples you provide first, and all that, or where you conduct your interviews, what community you're in, all that. So yeah, in my experience, I talked about anything, and religion was not the most prevalent topic. I've had some religious talks too, and both from theist and atheist views as well. But now I'm looking at my channel and I see GMO, death penalty, psychics, erasing of the borders between countries, not smoking and not drinking alcohol. I see veganism, objectification. What's the word? Objectification? Is
Yeah.
Did I pronounce it right?
Objectification, like,
Okay, yes, that
Mhm.
one. Politics, lie. Science versus higher powers. Yeah.
Yeah, you're all over the place. Yeah.
All over the place. Yeah.
Interesting.
So Danny, have you tried SE much yourself?
Well, there's usually, I mean, we have something very similar, the Socratic method. I do have a little bit of it depends on who I'm talking to. When I engage with people, a lot of times that can be identified as me doing doing street epistemology. But sometimes I favor the dialectic more than I favor the kind of one-sidedness of the questions and the answers. But it really just depends on who I'm talking to. If it's a very like, if I sense a lot of, if I sense that my interlocutor doesn't want to work with me and trying to solve a problem, then I just end up asking a lot of questions, right? But I think that's kind of like the benefit of the dialectic as opposed to debate, is that you're working towards solving a problem, a question, even though you might have conflicting views. So it depends who I'm talking to. So that's my little bit of experience there.
I'm curious. You said if your interlocutor doesn't want to work with you, how'd you figure that?
Well, let's say they're dishonest. So they're very highly motivated.
How do you know if they are being dishonest?
Well, there's certain cues. Like, let's say, like, it's going to vary based on the person. And usually I don't find out until later in the conversation when they might equivocate on a term. That might be an indicator, although not necessarily. They might contradict themselves. When let's say I ask a question at T1 and the next, an hour later they answer the question differently only because of some kind of objection, there's stuff like that. So when I get those kinds of people, I don't feel like we're trying to solve a problem together, which is what I think the point of the dialectic is about, right? We're trying to okay, we have this question, we have a back and forth, and we're trying to solve the problem. But when you get people that are that way, that will just say anything to preserve a value or a belief, then it's just harder to have that kind of conversation.
I like when you say we are trying to solve a problem together. I wonder how much of that you discuss with your interlocutors. Is it only you thinking to yourself that you are both trying to solve this problem, or are you discussing with them we are trying to solve this particular problem together right now?
So I have to make sure I've understood your question. Are you sort of asking me? Can you rephrase your question?
Yeah. So I was wondering. You said you want to try to solve some problem together with your interlocutor, and I was wondering to what degree do you discuss it with them?
To what degree?
Yeah, do they have as much understanding as to what specific problem you're trying to solve together?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a friend, Luke, right? And we were trying to figure out, what might count as a function. So a function in the world, and whether it's function can be understood in terms of good or bad, or whether it's merely descriptive and not in terms of good and bad. And so we were just having a back and forth about how we could understand function. Occasionally we disagreed, but we tried to resolve the disagreement in a way where we answer that question. And it wasn't a debate. It was almost like trying to solve a math problem together. But when you're doing the Socratic method or your street epistemology, there's a direction, right? I'm asking the questions and you're answering as to explore your psychology, right? Why you believe things, and why you think certain beliefs are justificatory and such. So, but I think there's definitely a place for that. But I'm just saying that I usually prefer dialectic and best case scenario. What's best case scenario?
Interesting.
Danny,
yeah, can you elaborate? What's the difference between dialectic and maybe street epistemology?
Yeah, so I could be wrong, and of course y'all are street epistemologists, so correct me if I'm wrong. But the idea is that your goal as a street epistemologist is to do an investigation of why one holds to a particular view, right? You are the detective, so to speak, right? And there's a strategy to it. Whereas there's the one that's being investigated, right? And so, whereas dialectic, it's not in that form, right? It's not why do we believe these things, or why you believe these things, or what counts as good reasons for believing in that thing. It's there's a problem on the table, and you're trying to figure it out together. And you might have conflict in the sense that there might be disagreement here and there, but the end goal, because debate, you have rhetoric, right? And in debate, you have rhetoric, there's a way that you're being perceived in terms of winning or losing. But in dialectic, it's not that way, nor is it that way for street epistemology. There's no winning or losing. I think debate has an extra element of winning and losing. So that's one thing that I think street epistemology and having a dialectic have in common is there's no winning or losing. So I guess those are some differences that I see, or in these three ways of having a conversation.
Mm-hmm. So in a dialectical conversation, you both kind of look at the same thing and put similar input from both sides to resolving this, to shaping whatever you're looking into. And in street epistemology, we mostly look at one person's shaping whatever they're shaping.
One is the investigator, the other one is being investigated, right? And with the purest intentions, probably, right? There's nothing wrong. I don't see. But still, there's a difference, and I think there's definitely a place for both. But if
Yeah.
you're into a particular, let's say we're all mathematicians, and then someone puts on the screen an equation, right? Well, street epistemology is not. I mean, it seems like that's gonna sit on the bench, right? We're gonna all work together, and we might have disagreements about
Yeah.
how to solve the problem, and we resolve those only because we all want to solve the problem.
Yeah, to our viewers at home, do not solve mathematical equations with street epistemology.
Well, I mean, even then, like in a dialectic, there could be a bit of like inquiry about, okay, why do you believe that? Because you're wondering, but you're investigating only because you're wondering if you're missing something, right? But so there's, it's hard to like create these like rigid categories. There's probably intersections in some of these places.
Absolutely. Yeah, okay, thanks for sharing that.
We have one disagreement there. Joshua thinks that often SE can help guide the person on how to answer the said question. I don't know how you...
Okay, yeah, I stand correct. If that's what it is, then my mistake, when all I'm trying to characterize is that, yeah, there's someone guiding the person and there's someone that's being guided. So I use the terms investigate and the investigator and the person that's being investigated. Sure, if you don't want to phrase it that way, that's my bad. It's still the same relation, right? You have the guide and you have the guidee.
Right, we could say that SE is more asymmetrical. Right.
Yeah.
I think that would be accurate.
Well, I don't want to take all y'all's time. Appreciate you having me on. So I didn't know if there was any.
Thank you for coming, Danny.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. We'll see you later. Right. Yeah, and Chucky from I Hear You mentioned that he thinks that even with technical conversations, it can still be helpful. I would say don't do SE in a math exam where you have a time limit. That's a caveat you could add, but yeah, I agree that, it's like if you're trying to think of, well, why are we doing this? Maybe you're doing web development or something like this. You might ask yourself, well, why do I think that this is the best method to approach this? Might there be other methods? What are the alternative ideas, right? You could do this sort of thing that's SE adjacent, even with yourself. I think, it's a little trickier to do SE with yourself, but it can happen.
Yeah, and I think it's as Danny said, there is a time and place. So I agree both with Chucky and with Danny here. Of course, you can't find a time and place for SE even in a math solving situation, for example. It might happen, it might not. So just feel free to discover wherever it's most useful to you. Yeah, we might be doing the dialectical conversation in a way that Danny just described to us, and maybe you just want to understand how your interlocutor is thinking about this problem a bit deeper. You might do a short mini SE session, maybe ask several SE questions to just understand them asymmetrically, and then you continue putting input to this problem. So, yeah.
Yeah, and while we haven't had a lot of vanilla SE conversations so far today, I can hear when you're using the techniques in your normal conversation, and you do it so naturally. It's great. I mean, like, one of the things you do so much is repeating back for clarification, and Danny did the same thing. And I think of that as like an element, one of these tools as part of SE, that's pretty crucial. But yeah, it's very fluid. Yeah.
Actually, speaking of vanilla SE conversations, I think it might count that we did one with Doug. Just a very, very short one.
For sure. That's right. Yeah, we can certainly do SE on each other too, if you want to go over your dog claim. we could look at that or anything else. But
Oh yeah, we can do anything.
otherwise,
So to our viewers, I'll just say that you can call in to ask us anything related to street epistemology. Maybe you have, maybe you want to consider different ways to proceed in a particular conversation you had. Maybe you had some troubles understanding what could possibly be done about something in terms of discussing a claim or a belief, or maybe you just wanted to know anything about how street epistemology is evolving as a movement. So basically, feel free to call in and discuss it with us. But until you do, let me ask you, Diamond.
Sure.
You mentioned you had some nice experiences recently in your trip. Could you elaborate?
Yeah. So, I mean, most recently on Wednesday, I was down at the Supreme Court. Is that what the one you're referring to when I was
I think
doing
so,
SE?
yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it was late Tuesday night, Politico released this Supreme Court leak about Roe versus Wade being overturned. And so by that evening, there were protests down at the Supreme Court over abortion rights. And fortunately, Wednesday morning, I didn't have much to do. I had like a 1 o'clock thing, and I'm only an hour north of DC. So I drove down with my cell phone and a tripod, and I set up right next to all the TV crews and everything, right? There's like lines and lines of these professional TV crews. And I just tried to do some SE on each side. So I'll be publishing those. I think tomorrow probably I'll be done with editing. And definitely I felt rusty. Like, one of the things about doing this, I'm hoping to see my improvement in having conversations as I go on. So, I'm hoping like a year from now, when I look back at my earlier stuff, that I would see a difference in how I am able to, maintain rapport, get down to the basic assumptions and find out what people, how people would change their minds. But one of the things that I noticed, and that I'll ask you about, is it's so much more challenging in real life to focus on a single claim. As you say, we naturally want to drift across different things. And even though I was there with clearly a topic, right? Even a topic isn't quite enough. It was like everybody was there because of abortion, and I even knew which side of the argument they were on, but I still needed more clarification than I think I got. I didn't spend enough time just clarifying the claim before going into, well, why do you hold this position? So I guess I'm not even sure how to ask this as a question, but when you go out and have these conversations, like, how much do you try and focus on a single claim versus letting things drift? I mean, isn't that, there's a bit of a balance there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And the answer is it depends. I'm very much interested in hearing what were the examples of the situations that you
Sure.
encountered.
So I got to talk to a law student, for example, and so I first just asked, how she felt, and she was shocked and appalled, and said it was disgusting that this was being overturned. And then, she started talking a little bit about how she read the judgment, and that the language was so strong, and that was, the kind of thing that the language was so strong that it was the type of thing that was used for landmark cases of slavery and things like this. And then she started talking about just her beliefs about the importance of abortion rights and how it's going to affect different people. And so there was a whole other topic. So there's the legal aspect of, well, was this a reasonable judgment from a legal aspect. Is there a constitutional right for abortion? That question kind of we were skirting around. And then there was the question of like, how is it going to impact people? Will people be worse off having this be overturned? That's like a separate conversation. And I think I should have clarified which path to take in that situation. And I don't think I did a good job, because in the moment, right, it takes so much time to reflect, and I'm trying to be fluid with my questions and avoid, all these pauses and ums and ahs, and so, that's where I struggle, I think.
Yeah, I think I feel you, and it might be difficult, and it might be important to pick a specific claim, and there might be just so many of them. So, from what I'm hearing, the abortion was the topic, and it's a very, very broad topic. There could be lots of different claims related to that, and usually in SE we pick not a topic but a claim. For example, this specific law will have those consequences, or we should do something in order to achieve something else. So yeah, there is even a separate exercise that I like to conduct when I teach SC that helps people navigate through a broader topic and to decide which specific claim to pick in any given situation. And of course, there are no ultimately right or wrong answers here. You can just pick whatever claim you and your interlocutor are interested in discussing. But maybe a couple of suggestions I could give. I'm not sure if that would be of any help to you, but let's see. So one is, what's important to them? What's a core claim? And even if you start discussing something else, if you encounter a more fundamental claim, it might be a reason to just shift to that claim. That actually probably not the only, but the most important reason to actually change the subject of discussion, change the claim, if you find that another claim is fundamental to the one that you've been discussing. Another pointer is whether this claim is not too vague, and whether it's potentially falsifiable, whether we can set some specific criteria to test, whether we can think about it. In advance, I start thinking about whether a person could or could not be wrong about that, because some claims are just truisms, right? That they could not be wrong.
Like, it's good to be nice to people.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not even that. But let's say you should be nice to a degree to people, not too much, not too little. It's so vague, it says almost nothing. So yeah, so suggestion would be to just try to pick a claim that's clear enough and important to and interesting both to you and your interlocutor, and that might be falsifiable, that a person can be possibly right or wrong about, and a reasonable person should or shouldn't have that amount of confidence in this claim.
How often do you, like, just in the conversation say something like, well, we could go down this path and talk about this, or we could, I hear a bunch of different claims. Which one do you think is most important to you? Do you use that type of thing to
Sure,
identify?
sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing, but I can also say I'm a little bit overwhelmed and confused as to where to proceed in this conversation. So let me just repeat what I heard. You're saying this and that and this, and I can see us going in any of those directions, and I'm actually interested in going in any of those directions. But probably because we have a limited amount of time, it would be prudent to just pick one of them. So which one do you think we should pick? Something like that.
Yeah, I think that would have helped for sure. I think that probably was partly just not being out in a while too, and the excitement of being at that Supreme Court and everything else. So
On the other hand, I just want to say that it sometimes might also be nice to just go broad, as you might have done in this case, because you don't have to pick a specific claim if you don't want. Maybe you just haven't heard enough yet. Maybe you just it might be good to let your interlocutor vent a little bit, to just say enough that for both of you to decide where to go next. Maybe something is bugging them. Maybe they just want to share all that's in their mind. And if you were to just, okay, let's stop there, let's just talk about this specific thing and not anything else, it might not be, it might not feel good for them. Sometimes.
yeah.
So it depends.
And this is one of the things I really enjoyed. Dolly, his channel's a little hard to find, but Juggling Lessons on YouTube. Dolly was really good at having those. It is still really good, I'm sure, at having those natural conversations where sometimes people just want to talk and be heard, and there's a benefit in that. And SE can provide, a good outlet for just letting people get their ideas out. Now, maybe some would argue that that's not SE at all, because you're not necessarily causing reflection. But I guess that comes back to definitions of SE and how fluid it is.
Right. Whether something is or is not SE is an interesting question in itself. And our working criteria right now are just two basic things: rapport and epistemology. So basically, if you're having a civil conversation, if rapport is high enough, and if you get to the epistemological part of your interlocutor's reasoning, meaning that you are discussing what methods they're using to get to whatever conclusions they are getting, how reliable are those methods, anything to that matter, then you're doing street epistemology. If you're not doing both of those things in a same conversation, we could say that you might be utilizing some street epistemology tools, but maybe not a full-fledged street epistemology conversation. And speaking about Dali, I also want to second that Dali is one of the masters of building rapport and listening to interlocutors and understanding them. So I think everybody who spoke to Dali knows that they can say a lot and be understood thoroughly.
Right.
And
Totally.
That's a good thing.
Awesome. Well, we have a few more minutes. If anybody wants to call in and go over claim or just chat about SE, and we're happy to have anyone in the chat wants to join us.
And we're
You just
not
click
boring,
on
I promise you.
That's right. I would say, have you used SE much just recently, like in the past couple days yourself?
Not sure about the past couple of days because I haven't interacted with a lot of people. I think, I mostly stayed home. But as I said, I do not think about it as a switch that I turn on or off. It's just something that I have, that I utilize naturally, I think. So yes, sometimes I can think to myself that, oh, now I am doing a full-fledged SE conversation, because sometimes it looks more like an interview, but sometimes it's not. And probably even most of the times I'm not asking my interlocutors for 10 or 20 minutes to interview them. I can just ask, maybe I already have rapport with them, maybe they are my friends, so I can just freely ask questions. They even know that I do street epistemology, and it's fine.
Yeah. There's I hear you posted a comment of a possible claim, owning a pet is slavery. So if you want to come on, Chucky, and do that one, that's totally fine. If you're unavailable, heck, I could probably even steelman that. Okay. I don't even know if I'd have to steelman it. I could just probably own that one. I don't know. That's
So you
tough.
agree with it that much?
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of these things that, like, so I do have pets, if you can't tell, and I do feel like guilty when I'm walking my dog, and I'm like, I have to walk my dog on a leash because I'm worried the dog's gonna just run off and get hit by a car. Now, okay, I wouldn't call that. Would I call that slavery? I mean, first of all, slavery to me, I think by definition, has to be people. So maybe I can't quite state that, but if you widen the definition to be maybe a forcing of will on another thinking creature, if you could broaden the term slavery to that, encompass that.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, maybe we could do that. So yes, I think that owning pets is forcing your will on other thinking creatures. So there you go. There's a claim.
And do you mean it in a bad way? So do you mean that they
Is it
would
bad?
be better off
Yeah.
if we were not doing that?
Right. And that's a great question. I think that most of the time, yes. So I would say that the majority of pet owners are, well, so okay, so what is the alternative, I guess, is kind of another way of phrasing your question. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I was
Right.
just wondering that it's very
Yeah.
interesting. I'm thinking to myself, well, are you saying that you should just let your dogs go, or
Right,
what's the
right.
alternative?
Just unhook that leash, right? So they can just
Right.
run free. Yeah, so that's like looking at the long-term solution potentially versus the short term. So on the short term, I think it would be more harmful if I unhook the leash and let them run free. So, but as a species as a whole, perhaps I think that dogs would be better off if they were, slowly reduced in the pet population and just allowed to be out in the wild. But I could still see the argument that, well, nature's super cruel and they're just going to be, have a shorter lifespan in the wild and things like that. Is that more harmful to just let nature run its course, so to speak, than to inflict your will on these creatures? And I don't know the answer to that in terms of which one is morally better, because I do think it comes down to the morality of it. If you're causing harm to these thinking creatures, assuming they're thinking, right?
Yeah, it is. It does sound like a very difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to ask you which way you're leaning towards in the long term, should humanity try to minimize the number of pets? Or,
So,
you
I think it's easier to say what like an ideal pet ownership would look like, because I could see free range, like farms or something. If you have a massive farm with tons of acreage and the animals are free to come and go as they please, they're well taken care of. They're there at their own will, so to speak. They're a pet by choice almost, which is kind of how I think that dogs evolved to be with people. So in those situations, I think that would be a good long-term solution, is if the only people who had pets are people who could have them on an at-will basis. Yeah, and there was some question in the chat about cats, and yeah, I could encompass this to include cats or really any wild animal, I think.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm wondering, let me do an outsider test. If
Sure.
someone were to say that maybe it's the other way around, maybe people do dogs more good even when they live in a close space like apartments or houses than they would have if they only own dogs that come to them naturally. Like they can even point to some evidence. I don't know, dogs loving their hosts and having the time of their life, walking in parks, eating the exact amount that they need, with all the vitamins and stuff. So how do we figure out which dogs are happier, or what should we do about it?
Yeah, so their contentment or their life satisfaction essentially is what you're trying to measure almost.
If that's what you were talking about, because I thought you were talking about that. No?
Yeah, no, I think
Okay.
that's fair to say. I think that would be a good
Okay.
way to do it.
Phew,
I mean, yeah.
I didn't miss Steelman you.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I guess the immediate indicator of, an animal running away and not returning, I think, is a pretty good indication of how much they're satisfied with staying with you. So, you could run that test of just release the dog and see if it comes back to you. And to some extent, actually, my cat does that. So we let our cat out occasionally, which is a whole nother separate question of whether I should do that or not, because it might inflict harm to birds. But anyways, now I'm shifting topics on you. So, but yeah, I think that's a reasonable method of looking to see their satisfaction. But I think that even in that case, like even if they come back to you, right, you sort of trained them to that point. So is that a good enough test? I'm not sure that it is, because maybe they're still come back to you off leash, but maybe when they're on leash, they're unhappy, right? So I would like an indicator that they're content while they're on a walk with you, for example, or maybe you don't have to correct them with, a choke collar or something like that. So, yeah, I
So now
don't know
you're
what the test
considering
is. Yeah.
not only, it sounds like you were considering not only just letting them go, but also, even if we keep them, we can just test for different stuff, whether we're doing something that's more harmful to them, whether we could make their lives better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, do you have pets?
Now I don't, but
Okay.
I did
Right.
have.
You did. And so does that question come up in your mind sometimes? Is that well, you mentioned already the issue of being in a small apartment, right? And that's kind of where this came from in my mind too, is like if they're not getting enough exercise, they're not happy in my mind. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have also been considering this question. I think it is an interesting and difficult question, whether we should or should not keep pets at all, and if we do, what conditions we should keep them at. So I'm leaning towards that we should be more considerate of the conditions we keep our pets in. So don't acquire a pet unless you're pretty confident that your conditions are
Right.
adequate. And that's one thing. And other than that, yeah, I can't say that I would like for people to just stop having pets at all, because I don't see a clear way to see whether it will be beneficial to those animals. Like in some cases, it is clear. For example, factory farming, like cows are suffering there tremendously. So of course they will, most likely they would be better off on their own and maybe not even being born than what's been done to them in factory farming. But people who love their pets, I'm thinking, yeah, it's not that clear at the very least. And also, I know you haven't mentioned it, but I'm also considering the factor of people liking pets and people benefiting from pets. So that's another thing that I consider. So basically, I would think about it in terms of overall,
like the net.
The net well-being
right.
of humans and animals. Yeah.
Right.
If
So
I were to think that it's lower,
if the humans, like if the humans were getting this enormous amount of benefit from it, and the dogs were net negative, but maybe not, they're not losing as much as the humans are gaining, you would sort of view that as
that would be an argument as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
How do you think about it?
I think, I don't know if I could justify that. That comes back to, do the ends justify the means almost? I don't know. I'm not good. This is where I do find philosophy interesting. I want to look more into the different views, but yeah, that is like there's some term for it, right? Where you're just trying to maximize this.
Yeah. I think I understand what you said, but just for the audience, I would
sure.
I would provide an example that will explain this point. I think imagine a person who is beating an animal in the street. Let's say it's a kitten, a nice kitten, and imagine if this person gets more pleasure than this kitten is getting pain. Would you say it's then a good thing for them to?
Clearly wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be a hideous conclusion to say that, the net well-being is increased, so this is probably a good act. So yeah, I think we would all disagree with that estimate. So yeah, that's another thing, very important thing to consider, and it's nice that you raised this point, that if we're hurting the dogs or other pets, then it would matter much less how much we benefit from it.
Right. We do have one more caller in the background. We're coming up at when we'd normally end the show. So, and I know it's really late for you, Rom. So if you want to wrap up now, we can do that.
No. Okay? To me, it's fine. Yeah, I can.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and bring Beau on. Hi. Do you want to go by Beau or?
That'll work. That'll work.
Okay.
Hello.
How's it going, Beau?
Doing good. I don't know what all you guys normally talk about. I just discovered you, but I saw gorgeous Roddy Chrome in the chat, and I talk to him from time to time. So he said that it'd be all right to talk to you.
Yeah. We welcome anyone. So we're practicing street epistemology here, which is a method of talking to people to just explore their ideas and what they think is true. Have you heard of street epistemology before?
Seems like I've heard the term come up on a few other YouTube shows. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I think that means like spontaneous thoughts about how to, approach people. Something to that effect.
Not exactly.
Tell me more what you mean by that.
Do you have a moment to talk about street epistemology? I'm just kidding. So, in a couple of words, it's an approach to conduct conversations that would be at the same time civil and that would dig to the core of the reasoning of the methods that one is using to come to the conclusions about anything.
Well, what I'm going to say is kind of deep, okay? And most people are not familiar with this. I didn't invent it. In fact, I got some of it from other books and kind of put it together with some other things, and it's in my book, but it's not. And I'm not trying to sell a book. So I'm not even gonna tell you what it's called because I'm not. Everybody will just think I'm trying to sell a book, but that's not it. But it is interesting, and I think for certain people who are really deep, this could maybe work with your epistemology idea. Maybe not. You tell me. Tell me what you think. Okay. Now, you've heard of the church father Irenaeus, right? Well, it's well known that he used
I haven't.
Greek.
Go ahead.
Me neither.
All right. Well, it's pretty well known that he used Greek gematria to try to discover who the Antichrist is in his generation. So he would take somebody's name and he would calculate the value of the Greek letters, because before numerals, every letter had its own value, right? So I think it was 400 or something like that before numbers were actually invented, numerals. So letters were numbers before that. So, you probably in grade school, you probably learned Roman numerals. Well, Greek letters also had a numeric value. Well, so Irenaeus, he would write the names of people in his time and try to figure out, like, okay, does this equal, the mark of the beast? Is this guy the Antichrist? This was like 150 AD, okay? So I say that because I want to differentiate like ancient Greek gematria from what some YouTube channels are doing with modern gematria, which is not the same thing by a long shot, okay? And the modern stuff is just kind of baloney, but the old stuff is, it is what it is. It's 2,000 years old, well, it's older than that. But and most ancient languages their letters had a numeric value also. Now somebody, and I propose that these were Pythagorean philosophers, mystery school teachers, the most educated people of their day. What they did was they took
could you just interrupt me for a second? I'm just not sure we're talking about the same thing. Like, it's not clear to me as of yet how it's related to a conversational approach of any kind. So if you tried to make it more concise and cut to the point first, and then maybe we could later expand if we understand why we're doing what we're doing.
The problem is if I do that and I don't set it up, and and I just throw something that's completely that you have no clue about at all, because nobody knows this stuff hardly. It just sounds weird. So I have to set it up a little bit so that you understand what I'm talking about.
So is there
start with the question?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, it's not really a question, but here's the crux. Okay, the people who created the name Lord Jesus Christ, okay, in Greek, okay, Kyrios, Jesus, Christos, those Greek letters equal the value, okay, of 3168, which is the size of the squared circle of the earth, or the diameter as it was known at the time to the ancient Greeks, times 4. And that's not a coincidence. This is Pythagorean math, and this kind of stuff is all over the Bible. And I mean Old Testament, New Testament, not just in Greek, but also in Hebrew. And these sort of things just prove beyond any reasonable doubt to any logical mind that somebody's trying to call me. Turn that off. So to anyone with a logical mind whatsoever, that proves beyond any real reason that fishermen and uneducated people like that, tax collectors, that sort of thing, did not write the Bible. These had to be incredibly intelligent people who concocted something like that and understood and knew the math behind what they were representing with the letters.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the evidence shows that the Bible was written by some smart people, right?
Yeah, educated people, because back in the day, most people didn't know how to read and write. So these people not only knew how to read and write, but also knew some really advanced math. So they couldn't have just hired somebody to just record what they were saying. No, they had to understand the mathematical concepts behind what they were constructing and putting together.
Help me understand now, Beau, like what's the idea behind you bringing up this idea?
Well, this was when I discovered that, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, to say everything I've ever learned from the Bible isn't what I've been taught. What I know, what I'm finding is not what I've been taught my entire life. So that, if you're a logical person, you cannot possibly say that what you learned in Sunday school is consistent with that. And
So
and
you're
I,
saying
I
it's
went
a
to Bible
curious
college.
and very important thing to just discover for yourself, to look at it from this point of view, and you just wanted to share this with us because you found it as something profound. Is that what you're saying?
It is, yeah. It is profound. Now, as far as like, how does that fit in with your epistemology? I don't know who you can say that to. I mean, that's why I write it in a book. But there's only certain people that seem to have the mental capacity, for whatever reason, to understand that. And I don't mean to be condescending to people, but it just seems like when I tell people, it's like they're off on another planet, like they can't understand what I'm saying. But it's really not that complicated. But I think for people that have a strong logical mind, they would maybe benefit to hearing something like that and go, oh, that really challenges my upbringing and what I've learned my whole life. And I was fundamental Baptist. I went to Hyles Anderson College and evangelized all over Chicago and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I was not brought up Christians, and I'm not an expert at this to any degree, but I can just say that I haven't heard about even about this person that you brought up in the beginning. I already forgot their name. But
Irenaeus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and that I only pointed him out because he's kind of well known for using that Greek gematria. He's not the only one by far, but I mean, he's just well known for using it to discover the name of the Antichrist, because he was trying to figure out if the Antichrist was alive back in 150.
Right. Yeah. So, I think that for some of our audience, it might also seem interesting. I'm thinking whether it relates to epistemology. Well, I can certainly imagine a conversation about some of that. So yeah, definitely it could. Like right now, I don't think we have a time for a full conversation discussing all that.
Sure.
We're almost out of time yet, but yeah, I think we could possibly reshape that into a claim to be discussed. So if we were to continue this conversation, for example, I would ask you questions like, what's the most important message behind this for you? What is the difference between people who know that and who don't know that? Stuff like that.
Yeah. And Beau, if you have time next week, we started just about 2 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
Same channel. You can subscribe to it. Like and subscribe, everybody. And maybe just go ahead and call in. And if, like Rom was saying, if you can just tighten it up to just a short claim, we'd love to talk some more about it with you, and maybe we can learn something. We've already learned a little bit from you already. So thank you so much for calling in.
All right. See you.
All right. See you later. Well, thank you, Rom. It's been a lot of fun. We should probably go ahead and let you get to sleep. And I hope to see you again on the stream. We don't ever know who's hosting next week, but it's a surprise every time. So tune in next week, I guess.
Thanks for having me. And I hope someone enjoyed our show today.
Yeah.
And
call in next week.
I hope being here some other times.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.